Welcome back, everyone. This is another installment of Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. In these fireside chats, I sit down with the people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes. My guest today is Greg Fulk. Greg's an accomplished executive known for blending strategic vision with hands-on leadership. He has a diverse background, which ranges from military service to commercial land development to wealth management. In his current role as CEO and founder of OrgIQ, he helps HR and execs find the very best and the very worst of what's happening inside their company. Welcome to Behind the Build. Thanks for joining me, Greg.
Thanks, Curtis. Excited to be here.
Man, before we jump in, your background fascinates me. You read bios, military history, books that might be an answer to a question on Jeopardy. You are a competitive power lifter, and you build saunas, and all of these things we could spend an entire podcast on separately. How does one get into building saunas?
I think the same causes a lot of great ideas lately, which is COVID. When you're stuck in your house for a couple months and you go down the internet rabbit hole, I think first, by law, you have to bake bread. You have to try and rewire something unsuccessfully. But yeah, came across the build plans for saunas and thought, I think the Hubermans and the Rogans of the world were pushing it, and they were bringing all the experts on. I thought it can't be that hard. It's a wooden box with a heater in it. And so now the electrician runs the high voltage wire, but everything else is fairly risk free. So I built a sauna in my basement during COVID. My best friend's a general contractor, and so we bought a domain. We did that much SEO, and now, gosh, we get inbound leads and calls. It feels like one a week, every other week, and so all of a sudden, I guess I'm in the sauna industry, among other things.
I can tell this is going to be a fun chat today. I've been looking forward to it for a while. You're the founder of a really interesting company that focuses on some things that we are really passionate about here at Mustard Hub, AI-driven insights. So to kind of set the tone, share with the audience, what is OrgIQ?
So OrgIQ is what we call a proactive workforce intelligence platform. And we start with kind of archiving and analyzing 100% of a company's email, their Teams messages, and we're building out Slack. But the idea is to really empower HR teams to have full insight into what's happening at their company. But even more than that, to identify the signal in the noise. I think about Jack Welch wrote a book, God, it's been like 20 something years ago, where he talks about the number two person at any company should really be a chief people officer, a chief human resource officer. This is the executive who's in charge of people, responsible for the success of people. And I've had a handful of roles over the years, and HR does a lot of really important things, but they don't often have the visibility, the transparency, the insight into really what's happening. And so IT can sometimes find these messages, but that's always reactive. I got to wear a compliance hat at a wealth management firm, and compliance has full access to everything just from the risk mitigation. I thought, why can't HR have that insight? And so that's what I built. I started with kind of this compliance base and kind of built it up for HR. So OrgIQ is really in the business of helping HR see everything, address everything, and really identify, as you said in the opening, we help you identify the very best and the very worst of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that even when he wrote that book, and even more than just a couple of years ago, having that kind of access to things and being able to read and analyze the way we can do it now with AI, it wasn't even possible back then. You almost had to be reactive, and you didn't even have the luxury of being proactive now, right?
Yeah, that's right. It used to be keyword lists, and you would build. I remember. You would build. You think about all the bad words that you don't want your kids to say. You also don't want your coworkers to say them. And I hesitate to even when I give, because we still allow keyword lists, because there are, if you're in the midst of a merger and acquisition, or if you have some named competitors, you really do want some exact matching. But we used to have words that would indicate, anger, words that would indicate policy violation. And again, you can imagine, the devil's dictionary of everything no one should ever say. But AI has made that so much easier, to where you can just take the body of an email and ask AI, not only is there anything in here that no one should be saying, but what's the tone here? Is it positive? Is it neutral? Is it negative? And when you start grouping tones by person, by division, by inbound or outbound, there's a lot of insight you can really gain from that.
So tell me about the kinds of organizations that come to OrgIQ. Are there any particular industries you focus on? What do those customers look like? You don't have to name any names, but tell me a little bit about what those customers look like.
Sure, sure. So when I think about companies that have between 50 and about 500 employees, and in my experience, 50 employees is about the time you really need a dedicated HR professional. You absolutely benefit from one sooner, but I run a startup and I know I just can't afford an HR professional today. So I'm going to do that. Of course, I'm also the CFO and the electrician and the janitor. So I'm going to do all the things. But I know as a company
The
grows, we're
sauna builder.
and a sauna builder, right? Workforce intelligence and saunas. I'm getting it to take off. We there comes a point there where you really hire an HR professional, and that's
Mm,
when we're going to be a great fit, because you need that professional mindset of, I'm in charge of protecting the company from risk and
yep.
elevating my people, and somebody focused on it. And then we grow up to, 500, 600 employees, where HR is finally at that size, I find, really starting to get the resources that they need. So hopefully they've got a benefits administrator and some other folks on their team. And I know the HR people at 5 and 6, 700 person people firms are like, really, we have the resources that we need now. And I find that what I offer, what OrgIQ does, is really able to elevate so much of that, their ability in the interim. And one of the ways, as I mentioned, archiving, we really are retaining 100% of all that correspondence, the emails and the teams. And so that saves institutional knowledge. So, but firms at 50 to 500 space, we love professional services, accounting, consulting, insurance, wealth management, folks that are in front of their keyboard all day long. If email is a good measure of how you're running your company or what's happening at your company, we're going to be a great fit. There are, healthcare tends to be very different, and that email
Yeah.
is not central. Manufacturing is not as good, but really anything in that professional
Right.
services is a good fit for us.
Tell me, so when these folks come to you, what are the kinds of solutions that they're looking for? In other words, or what particular challenges are they trying to solve specifically when they come to OrgIQ?
I think there's a couple things. One, if a company's ever had a, call it, a negative legal experience with an employee, whether it was your fault, whether it was the employee's fault, I think many of them recognize that email is Exhibit A. What were the things that we put in writing? And maybe an employee said, "Hey, I feel unsafe. Maybe I feel harassed. Maybe a supervisor inappropriately denied vacation, and there were some FMLA concerns." But what was being put in writing? So they're coming to me saying, "Holy smokes, a complaint did come in. It never got escalated. We missed it. It spiraled. It exposed us to
Wow.
risk." The other side is true. I know I tend to talk about the negative, but the all those thank you notes that your sales team gets for really doing a good job, they never forward that to their manager or their supervisor. Annual review, promotion, opportunity seasons come and go, and
Yeah.
we help HR really highlight some of that. So I would say the first half of what teams are coming to me with is, hey, really help us with some findings, finding some signal in the noise. The information retention is the other piece. Is, hey, an employee left. Maybe they deleted their inbox. Maybe IT deleted their inbox. But we really need to find that contract from 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, 3 years ago, and we have it. We have it all. Everything is saved. Nothing ever
Wow.
gets deleted. We built it so we'd be SEC and FINRA and HIPAA compliance. We save everything forever. It's immutable, so it can't be changed. And now HR kind of gets to look like a rock star in the,
Yeah.
hey, head of sales, that contract that you're looking for, we could find it. Or even the, maternity leaves start early sometimes. Sometimes vacations you get stuck because of hurricanes, and now all of a sudden HR, instead of joining in the panic of we can't reach this person, we can just pull up their inbox, and we don't have to send a request to IT. We don't have to use Outlook search, which is difficult at best. So we're really, amplifying HR's ability to solve problems. So I think our clients today are seeing that, sending the inbounds of like, holy smokes, this is a great feature I didn't know existed.
That's incredible. So I mean, it's the like the file storage capabilities, are pretty even outside of the insights that you get. Just having that, it's pretty remarkable. And it sounds like, you talked about managerial assessments and all these things that typically, where they wouldn't have insight into certain things. You're also almost helping remove or at least mitigate to some degree this recency bias, right? That you'll find a lot of managers fall victim to, right? Um,
That's right.
that's
And
a
yeah. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I think they know. I think HR and supervisors and managers, I think they know, and they're working their best to avoid some of these recency bias, these halo effects. The Everybody's review is based on their last 60 days of performance, not their last 6 months. It's just so hard to grow out of that if you're just searching an inbox or searching an employee file or searching some notes.
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to help proactively categorize and tag some of these positive sentiments, some of these best ofs, that hopefully make it easier.
So, what kind of insights specifically do the users get with OrgIQ? Is it solely for administrators? Is it for users? How do they get them? How do they access these insights? We obviously don't have to get super far into the weeds, but at a high level, and tell me about how it all works.
Oh, you're getting every technical detail starting now. Here we go.
Okay.
So I think of it in three layers. And the first is good old fashioned search, right? Being able to just search for something. So if you get maybe there's an anonymous rumor or a complaint that, hey, when Greg talks to his group, boy, he's not as professional as we hope, or he's saying things that we just are not in line with the culture. Hey, in about a fraction of a second, HR goes in and does a search. Show me everything Greg has sent his team in the last 30 days. And I'm literally going to click through and read some of those emails to see if I can find what we're looking for. So we can write searches, we can write automated searches, we can have searches pushed to our inbox that are alerting. So that search layer, not amazingly sexy. There's a number of cool search tools out there, but we do it well. We do it very, very quickly. The second step is we like to zoom out, and we like to look at work patterns as determined by email and team. So show me, the number of emails you've been sending over the past 6 months, over the past year. I think work from home is really, really great in a lot of situations. But I know sometimes the executive team, they just wonder, gosh, we used to see Greg all the time, and now he's not here, and he's not very loud. I'm very loud, but the other Greg in this alternate universe is not very loud. Is he like, how is his output today compared to his output then? And I can just show you on a line graph. Like, it used to be here and he worked from home and it went up, or it stayed the same, or it went down. And then we can view it on a heat map and show me the times of day folks are working. And this feels big brothery, and I know it is, and I've got a great story about how all this came to be. But I just want to highlight that for every lack of productivity allegedly that you can view, you can also view the folks that from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. are working their tail off to catch up. And the folks that, are getting up Saturday morning and trying to get everything done to be ready for the next day, every bit of that is as true. So you can see the burnout, you can see the folks putting in the extra time, and it gives you data. I work with a bunch of HR consultants, and I tell them I'm not really in the business of solving problems, but I provide a lot of data. I highlight, I can shine the flashlight, and you can decide what to do with that. So talked about
Yeah.
search. We talked about some of that meta analysis, and then our sentiment tool. Every email is getting tagged with positive, neutral, or negative sentiment tags. When you look at your internal emails or only your coworkers, When those are positively tagged, you're going to find signs of healthy culture. You're going to find people living your core values. The opposite happens too. When you see those negative tags, you're going to find, are we feeling some stress? Do we have a bad apple? Are we just not nice to each other? And some of that is really easy to fix. Similarly, on the inbound side, we talked earlier about the thank yous, the kudos that come in, the client complaints come into, right? The negativity, hey, this is broken, hey, this feature doesn't work. And I know the executives in particular like this idea of I talk about a Saturday morning CEO, right? You're a CEO, it's Saturday morning. What do you want to know? Do you have any angry clients? Did that big deal get signed? Any feedback from our biggest customer? I've got a tool, and if you're a good CEO, hopefully you're not blowing your people up on the weekend with text and email. But you want to know, right? It's your livelihood. You probably took a disproportionate amount of the risk. So you want to know, and this is a tool where you can just find all these answers immediately. So
Wow.
those are the three big layers I think about search and the analysis, and then some of the sentiment and the AI tools.
And it fascinating, makes me super curious, given, your history and your background, what led you to, founding OrgIQ? I'd love for you to share that. You mentioned there's a story about how it kind of came to be. So if you could share a bit about your career path and how you
Sure.
ended up a founder, that'd be amazing.
Sure. Uh, so I can tell you like what time it was when this idea happened, because it was February 6th, 2022. It was a Sunday night. I'm in Indiana, so it's cold in February in 2022. But there's a ring at the doorbell, which doesn't happen in the suburbs as much these days as when I was a kid. But I opened the door and it was the FBI, and they've got badges up just like in the movies. They were very very kind, and they start with, "Hey, are you Greg?" You can feel the blood just drain. And then they asked, hey, do you work at, this wealth management firm? And do you know this guy? Because we need to talk to you about a coworker. So they came in, which in retrospect, my lawyer says I should not have invited them in, but I did. And we sat at my kitchen table and we offered them tea, which they declined. But they opened their manila folders and they proceeded to provide overwhelming evidence that a partner of mine had stolen a lot of money, almost $5 million from one of our clients. And I missed it. I was the chief operating officer, I was the chief compliance officer, and I did not know. I didn't see it coming. And
Wow.
fast forward 9, 10 months, and between the FBI and the SEC and the IRS, federal or the Criminal Investigation Department, they kind of reflected and said, Greg, don't take it so hard. There's no way you could have caught this. And I didn't buy it. I was like, no, I'm smart. I know how things work. And they said, no, this was a multi-layer entity structure. The client, it wasn't stolen. The client was tricked. It was defrauded. But you couldn't have caught this. And I just didn't buy it. So I spent the next couple weeks really downloading, tens of thousands of emails. That's what I knew how to do. That's where I started. And to that example a minute ago, I wanted to see those emails on a line graph, and I wanted to see them on a heat map. I just wanted to see, what was this person doing every day? And sure enough, you can kind of see the day or the time frame where a gambling addiction really starts to take over somebody's life. And when you look at that heat map, Curtis, when you and I get up in the morning, we get up, we send a bunch of emails. Maybe there's some time for lunch, we keep working. The
Yeah.
evenings are, we work out, we go sit in our saunas, right? We hang out. But in the evening, we catch back up again. But that's kind of the normal pattern. Well, this guy was 1 to 3 in the morning, manic, just sending hundreds of emails and then nothing for 2 days. And then a random evening from 8 to 10, hundreds of emails and then nothing for 2 days. And I don't know that those patterns are in and of themselves indicative of like, well, anybody who sends email at 2 a.m. is doing something wrong. But they're very much red flags. And I want to believe that had I gone in and said, well, here's some level of analysis, here's a tool to visualize, that is so out of pattern for
Yeah.
what literally the other 100 or 200 people at this firm worked at. Like I would have said, okay, I need to call a couple of his clients, which is a normal activity. I just never called his. I need to call a couple of his clients. I need to go to a couple meetings with him. I need to schedule, like, I just would have zoomed in. I would have focused and said, all right, I've got time for you now. We're going to spend a lot of time together and I'm going to uncover this. So he's in federal prison now, has been and will be for quite some time. So I guess that's kind of sort of silver lining. But that's how it came to be. And as I thought about, that this is with my old investment advisor, compliance, risk mindset, that's where I thought, well, most firms don't have compliance officers because most firms aren't regulated that way.
Right.
Who might know this? Well, that's where the HR input happened. I've got some friends and family in HR, and they said, God, we would love that. We really want to protect our firm from risk. We want to protect our employees from risk. And this was a tool that helped really highlight
That's an amazing story. I mean, most of the great,
that.
most great startups have an awesome story. They don't start with the FBI showing up at your doorstep, but that's one that I imagine you enjoy telling, at least just to see the reaction on some folks' faces when you tell them that's who wound up at your door.
Oh,
Um,
there's one piece. So I will say it started with a bunch of phone calls from numbers I didn't know, so I just didn't answer them. But you get one, you get two. You get, Sunday night is not the time I get those. Well, they did leave a voicemail, and I do have the voicemail saved. And I'm
wow.
not sure if this is the most scammy sounding voicemail or like the most legit. But as soon as I'm done listening to this, this is such and such with the federal, at the FBI. We need to talk to you. As soon as I'm done listening, is when the doorbell rang, and it was right out of like central casting. Like you can see somebody made a movie about end voicemail, ding dong. I'm like, oh God, what is happening?
I think being a movie director is probably going to be the next stop in your nonlinear circuitous professional route. But I want to I want to shift a minute into people and the workforce. And a lot of organizations seem to not understand what drives their employees, their people, and there's a disconnect between leadership and the workforce. I mean, would you agree with that? And if so, how do we start bridging that gap? You're obviously analyzing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions
Mhm.
of messages. What's your suggestion?
I start, and I'm no by no means an expert communicator. I think my wife and children are here; they would be nodding in agreement with that statement. So I can start with highlighting it. I get a chance to work with a number of HR consultants that really specialize in culture, and I asked them this type of question, and a lot of them. So there's a couple issues at play. We have a larger multi generational workforce now than we've had in the past. We have folks
Very
working
much.
well into their 50s and 60s,
Yeah.
and then we've got our 20 somethings who have grown up communicating digitally in a very different manner than we'll say me and even those senior to me. And I think we all remember the first time we started getting texts where words weren't spelled out and lacked punctuation. We kind of bristled like, hey, we were former college educated. I know how to communicate. So what are you doing not using full words? And we've seen that bleed over into email. And if you ever had a chance to work at a job before email, you wrote memos and you edited memos, and memos were truly professional writing. And so when you adopted email, you adopted that professionalism that really maintained for 20 years. And now you have a group that is so comfortable communicating with their fingers on keyboards, it never occurred to them that that's should be a college term paper. And so you have this conflict, right? And I wanted to build a tool that said, hey, when Sarah complains that her boss Greg just doesn't like her, I want HR to like go right to the source. Show me all the email between Sarah and Greg because Greg's nearly 50, Sarah's 20 something, and what's going is Greg might be a jerk, and Greg could probably stand to say please and thank you a little bit more. But Sarah might also be a little thin-skinned, and the truth is always in the middle. So let's just look. And so that's some of the insight I share with my clients, but really I get to partner with these HR consultants to say we can make such a huge difference by just having our managers and our leaders and folks at the top replying with a heartfelt thank you every now and then.
Yeah.
Even if you're pasting it into ChatGPT and saying, "Hey, help me write a sincere but concise thank you," it's going to give you a great template. I don't think we should outsource our brains to these AI tools, but gosh, they're just so stinking helpful
Yeah.
that I know I've written a number of handwritten thank you notes based on what ChatGPT have kind of helped me verbalize because we can all come up with, I don't know, 3 bullet points of sentiment or of emotion on what this impact of this event had. So I think we can go a long way towards improving our communication, but we got to know where to start, right? And
Yeah.
so I tend to default to we start where the almost the risk is the highest, the signal's the highest, the negative sentiment is the highest. Those are the things I can find. So we start with, and those are the maybe the easiest things to fix. Now, should management be communicating their financials and being transparent about their strategy? I have a mountain of opinions about those, and I tend to always defer to yes, more transparency is better, but I don't think that's a panacea type answer to communication issues.
Well, I have so many things that I want to add here. It's interesting how you sort of gravitate towards the um, that negative sentiment first, right? But what's really interesting about that, and I'm going to step a little bit out of my depth here. I know that there have been some really interesting studies that try to understand what can have a greater impact. Either more positive thinking or less negative thinking. And maybe if you ask 100 people, you'll get 50 to say one thing and 50 to say the other. But actually, the data is overwhelmingly clear which provides the greater positive impact. Do you know which one it is?
I feel like I've read this story and forgotten the conclusion.
It's
So
actually,
is
yeah.
it less negativity?
It's less negative thinking.
That's
Less
right.
negative thinking overwhelmingly
Mhm.
provides a greater positive impact than more positive thinking. Not that they're both obviously incredibly valuable, and I think we need both. But it's interesting that you go there, and I think, rightfully so, whether it was a gut instinct or that's, you actually found that in the numbers, it's where you're gonna wind up having, a greater positive impact. The communication obviously is super important. You touched on that a
Sure.
couple of times. You mentioned it a couple of times. You seem to be doing great here, so I don't know if maybe your wife and kids, right? Totally looking at that through a different lens. But you know it's one of those things that is critical for that transparency that you talk about, the communication, right? You need it in order to have this culture of strong retention, right? Being able to engage your folks, to be really transparent with them, to communicate effectively, both the positive and the negative, is important, not just for keeping people, but also for getting talent in the door.
Mhm.
A lot of organizations totally miss the mark. You probably work with some who've come to you with the problem. Why do you think that so many places struggle with that? And how can these organizations and their HR teams begin to fix it?
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors at play. I think corporate stress kind of bubbles down into management stress, can bubble down into people stress, and I mean, I know that the worries of the top executives are probably very different than the worries of maybe some of the more entry level folks. But that doesn't let the executives off the hook to kind of addressing that. I remember when we were really small at my old employer, we were 20 employees. I was employee number 21, so I got to do everything from finance and accounting to HR and recruiting. And during these interview process, I used to always offer to them, "Hey, if you like, this is an interview. We both know, this dance we're doing where I'm telling you how great you are and you're telling me how great you are, and we both know neither of us are this great. But I really like, I want you to find people at this company and reach out to them and just ask them about their experience and don't even tell me. Find them on LinkedIn. Of course, I'll introduce you to literally anybody. Folks are busy, but I will connect you to literally anybody because I want them to know that everybody we hire is a little bit on them, right? Because we want everybody to be part of this culture, and I want you to know that if you become part of this place, like that's what we're kind of going to expect of you. So there's a little bit of this kind of we're all in this together. I know that that sounds good, and I know I've worked at many places where they that was said, but I never really
Yeah.
felt that. Um, but it's becoming increasingly difficult on both the objective and the subjective side to evaluate people, right? I used to, when I would talk to my team about interviewing, I never wanted to win an interview. Like, there's nothing like when the interviewer walks away and says, haha, I asked the how many windows are in Seattle question and they didn't know the answer. I just won. And I'm thinking, God, what did you get out of that? What benefit is it to win? I really want
Yeah.
that person to have their best possible day in this interview, because I really want to know, like, what does that look like? What does somebody at their best look like? And then once they're on board, how do we create an environment where at least some part of every day gets to be them at their best? I mean, at the end of the day, somebody still has to reconcile bank accounts, right? Which is just mind numbing, right? Somebody has to receive feedback on their art, which God bless the artists that put up with people like me in the world that, want a logo moved. But the idea that there's something here that can bring you fulfillment's a lot, but can bring you joy, at least contentment, is something I think companies need to focus a lot more on, and hopefully they can find a way to get there.
It's a really great way to approach. I think when you have new people that you've brought into your sphere, your ecosystem, maybe you've hired them, maybe you haven't yet, but even just in interviews and having the confidence in your culture, um, even if you don't really, I mean, it just goes a long way to show the kind of culture that you're trying to create. And that's a level of transparency that you don't really find very much. So that's a really great start on how to fix some of those things. Very good, some good suggestions there. Definitely need
I would just I would throw in one more thing. I had a great I think I read it in a book a long time ago. Is I'm off to do is when you plan a new initiative, as you're planning it before you execute, just ask yourself, what will this look like if it's successful, and what will it look like if it's not, and spell out those scenarios. We're going to build a new work from home policy. We're going to roll out new laptops. We're going to change the way our CRM works. If we're successful at this, what will that look like? People will X, employees will Y, systems will Z. And if it doesn't work out, what's that going to look like? Oh, yeah, that'll be frustrating. Okay, now we have things to measure. And I think so many things, even on the culture side, I've sat through many a core value exercise and just asked the question, what first? Why are we doing this? Not to suggest we shouldn't, but why are we doing this? And if we do this well, what will we expect this, how will we measure this in 3 months or in 6 months or in 9 months? And let's just define that now. And so all of our effort is going into the outcomes, right? Nobody needs another set of ignored core values or core values that even the executives can't name.
Yeah.
But just, it's classic Stephen Covey stuff, right? Like, begin with the end in mind. Like, where do we want this to be?
I love that, and that's definitely a mindset that I can appreciate on just about every level. Um, we know that a breakdown in communication, can be indices of a lot of issues, right, in an organization. I mean, given your experience so far, what
Mhm.
you've seen through, analyzing millions of records for the organizations that you currently work with, um, what have you seen that breakdown in communication cause? And then give me some other warning signs that companies could be in trouble when it comes to their workforce.
I worked for this crusty old lieutenant colonel in 2004. She's delightful, and she reminded me of, I think it's called Hanlon's razor, and it's never attribute to malice what you can do incompetence. And that's a bit harsh. It's very much something you'd expect the military to say, but never assume the light version, I would say, maybe more appropriate for an HR setting, is never assume somebody's mean or angry or hates you. Just assume they're busy and overwhelmed and don't have time, because that's something that I see in the data. That's something my clients see using our tool, is the sharp one word replies, no, or can you redo slide 4, or this isn't going to work, right? And it's again, we talked about the written context versus the relationship building and the personal context. that is something we see regularly. And those types of phrases, I will say, get flagged on the negative sentiment side all the time. And so I just always exercise caution to say, first, what you write needs to be, fully evaluated in the sentiment. So if you have the time to say, hey, really great effort on these, I think slide 3 missed the mark. I know it's not possible, although we do have voice to text now, which makes that easier. We do have, some LLM tools that can make your communication friendlier. All that stuff matters. All that stuff's important. But when you're on the receiving side of it, getting the no, this is bad, whatever that number is, whatever that feeling is, taking the mindset, A, that it's about the work, it's not about me, that they're not mean, they don't hate me, I hope, that they're probably busy, they're probably overwhelmed, that they probably have 4 or 5 or 10 of folks like me vying for their attention, vying for their time, and it just they're distracted. So I would say that that's an example of something I see the terse replies regularly, and I mean, I think that's the only type of communication we get in text messaging,
Yeah.
is those
Yeah.
terse, like, no, it's a text from my 75-year-old mom when she says, "Hi, Greg, comma, enter." Like, mom, it's a text. I know it's from you. I
And
get
then
it.
signs it as mom, right?
That's right. Love your mother. But I do think there's something to be said, and there's so many ways to fake it now, Curtis. I mean, Apple. I mean, if you just put H comma space, you can have that text expand to like, "Hey there, I was just thinking about you," like, or the sign off. "Thanks so much for your time. Hope this wasn't a bother. All the best, Greg." I mean, again, that's a couple keystrokes, and just have it auto fill it. It's a little disingenuous, and I know, but it's better than the opposite of
Yeah.
like Greg out, done, right? Which just it can feel a little more aggressive.
I want to pivot and talk AI right now. it's I'm absolutely like in love with what you guys do. I know that AI driven insights can help get leaders a lot of perspective around data, allowing them to see the story that the data truly tells. How do you see AI providing this context?
I think so. First is so a couple different layers, and in the context of OrgIQ and helping HR and executive teams identify and prevent themselves from risk, which often means, of course, following the law and treating their people above board. Immediately identifying the examples where those things didn't happen are areas that AI is going to be a lot better, I think, or at least provide a better screen than people. So, a couple examples. Um, is there anything in this email that indicates sign of harassment or discrimination or workplace violence or wage theft or FMLA denial? Like, these are all filters that we're about to go live with, that we can just, and not only can we take one pass at those sorts of language, we can instruct our agent to return its confidence interval as well and say, I'm 20% confidence. I'm 20% confident this was a sign of violence. And you might read it today and say, this is just some football related trash talking, nothing to worry about here. And I don't even want to see things at the 20% confidence. I want to see things at the 80% confidence, right? I do have a client now that HR wants an alert anytime PTO is denied, right? Doesn't mean they're going to act on it. They've got good supervisors, good managers. But if a supervisor puts in writing like, hey, I have to deny your PTO request, HR just wants to see that and catalog that. And if they find, so first, we're going to give them tools so they can detect patterns. But if they see in the language this was clearly an employee said I need time off to bring my mom to the doctors. Now you're thinking HR knows that might be FMLA protected. I need to do the quick research to see if that's something we need to address, because this was a good supervisor who followed
Yeah.
our PTO approval policy. But now I've got an additional amplifier to my HR ability that can really dive into that language, or maybe I can find some of those patterns. So I'm very, very bullish in the short term on AI as brilliant language assistant. there's a wrong. I mean, for every good. So again, I'm a data provider. Like I want to analyze everything and provide dashboards and data. Absolutely, nobody should hire anybody or fire anybody based on my tool. Nobody should lay off anyone in the HR department because we can look at this. In fact, this is going to make the people you have even more powerful. They're going to make them more capable. I call it an amplifying tool. It's going to make them give them capability they didn't previously have. But it requires human beings to review the output, to thoughtfully, go through. And if you're not going to respond to the data,
Yeah.
I can't fix that.
Do do employees get are they made aware that all the communications that they're having is being read and analyzed and cataloged? Do they have to sign off on that? Is there some sort of permission granting mechanism that has to be in place, or do leaders not even need to tell them?
I think 80% of the employees of my clients don't know a tool like ours is in place. I think 10% probably know because they're in a regulated industry, something's like in place, and then 10% are pretty transparent with it. I do have an executive that told his whole team they don't need to worry about BC seeing him on all this stuff anymore because he's just going to go in and search for things that are interesting to him. And they were like, "Oh, so you're going to read all our stuff?" He's like, "Well, yeah. I mean, I own the company. I'm going to read all your stuff. You don't have to bother BC seeing me." On the legality front, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy in the United States when you use your corporate email. I don't install anything on anybody's laptops, anybody's phones. I don't have access to Facebook or Gmail. We literally just plug into the mail servers, so Google or Microsoft, and only the things that pass through that mail server are the things copied over to my system. So we really are just retaining corporate info, institutional info. If you log into Gmail and send, like, I don't have any insight into that. So I there's a little bit of a big brother, dystopian future of
Yeah.
the tool that I have. But when you've seen some of the risk it can mitigate and some of the opportunities to improve culture and to improve habits, I mean, it's a trade-off that is not going to be a perfect fit for every business. I mean, I think it should be. You should all sign up immediately. But I recognize this is just out of line. The companies that have built great cultures might not see the a value in this sort of tool, other than the institutional knowledge retention piece of it.
Yeah.
They might find that that's pretty useful. Um,
I want to dig into that for a second because there's it's like a whole bunch of questions I'm just going to squeeze into one here.
sure.
I understand how divisive the topic can be. I'm curious about, I mean, not just AI's overall application to the world of HR, and how that's impacting workers, but even your tool specifically. Like, this may be a question for your roadmap, or maybe even what the future looks like, right? Because there's a real world I could see where if you are able to ingest this kind of information, then in theory, right, if there is a leader who leaves or an employee, the amount of institutional knowledge that you've been able to retain and that you've probably been able to in some way even organize,
Mhm.
can be used to potentially even train the next person that comes in the door, possibly even replace them. Not really sure what that looks like. But I'm kind of curious, like, how is this all impacting workers? What does that roadmap look like for OrgIQ? And is there going to be a possibility for organizations to use everything that they've been able to build with this software
Mhm.
for you know future workforce training and planning?
Yeah, you're right on it. And so when we think about going into Q1 of 2026, we've got some stuff to finish this quarter. But you think about an employee who has left the company, that has left behind a year or 2 or 3 years worth of correspondence. We'll be able to train an agent based on their email, everything they sent, everything they received, and then HR will be able to say, "Hey, help me write a job description based on what this person actually did." Right? And it'll really be able to highlight the short, the medium, the long term things, and then help me build an interview guide to really tease out the skill sets that either this person had and we want to replicate, or they didn't and we're going to need. And then help me build a training plan based on what's the most important thing to train them on. Because if they're expected to produce a report every single week, that might take precedence over some more quarterly goal. And then deploy an agent based on the previous employee to the new employee. So now the new person has a training buddy. And so when the boss
Yeah.
says, hey, we need an XYZ report, they can just ask, say, hey, what the hell is an XYZ report? And the agent's like, oh, yeah, this is something Greg used to do every week. Here's the last three. It's just an Excel. Here's the copy. Well, where does he get the data for these? Oh, well, here's how, here's 3 emails he would send to the finance department. Clearly, that he's asking them for the data.
Yeah.
Perfect. And you think about what that does for employees getting up to speed quicker, growing their skill set quicker, adding value quicker. And those are the folks that as soon as you figure out, they say you shouldn't change something till you figured out what to do. Well, a lot of things need to be changed, but figuring out what to do can take an awful long time. We can get you up to that place a lot quicker. So that's where we're headed, is really the, that exoskeleton that the person wears that makes them stronger, faster, quicker, lift a little more weight type of thing.
I'm fascinated by this. Do you think that employees see how this AI can benefit them, can be beneficial, or do you feel like they're still wary? Do you feel like their jobs are, do you think that they feel that their jobs are at risk?
Um, Fear's a powerful motivating factor. There's a book that dropped here a couple weeks ago called "If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies." Right, by Eliezer Yudkowsky. Like it's next up to read. I've had a couple people recommend it. This idea that there are real risks with superintelligence. When you listen to our smartest thinkers on the subject, some are unbelievably bullish and some are absolutely terrified. And I don't know which is right. Um, we're seeing hiring start to tape from what the recruiters of the world are telling me. Hiring starting to taper, maybe even decline. I don't know how much of that is economic cycles, political environments, tariffs, normal economic stuff versus impact of AI. So I guess I am sympathetic or empathetic with the fear that this could make things worse. Change is always, I think that's something HR people know better than most. Change always drives fear, right? So whether it's change for the better, change for the worse, I'm still pretty bullish, right? We know AI chess can beat any human alive, but we also know humans with AI assistance can beat AI chess. And so the partnership between you and your tool should be the most powerful outcome. I think about, gosh, my ability to start and create this company is because of AI. I mean, it helps write, the bottom half, the easiest half of our code. It drafts our marketing updates. It analyzes our click data, stuff that if I do poorly probably means the company fails. And if I do well, it means, we live to fight another
Right.
day. And without the AI tools, I wouldn't have it. So it is creating opportunity and educational opportunity for me and my coworkers, my peers, and our clients that didn't otherwise exist. So that's the, what do they say? Ronald Reagan used to say, one day I just want a one-handed economist, because this is on the one hand and on the other hand.
Yeah.
That's where it is with AI.
It doesn't surprise me that the hiring is probably tapered a little bit. I think that's economic cycle in the sense that, I think the same thing happened, at other turning points, right? In modern, innovation history. Think the Industrial Revolution and how it changed. It changed so many jobs. It replaced a lot, but it created, with the amount that it created, right, was incalculable at the time. And I have a feeling that AI is probably going to do something similar. Right now, it's replacing a lot of things, but it will, in the end, probably create, right, a lot of new jobs that right now we don't know what those look like. What was that latest Nobel Prize that was in economics? It was just awarded to those folks who, drew those correlations between innovation and economic development. So, I think
Mhm.
that it's a matter of time between how we figure out what the new economic mobility looks like, and then everybody will then start to get hired. Hopefully,
That's right.
that's my positive spin on all of those things.
I, I think so, but I mean, there'll be plenty of risk, plenty of reward, and but transition periods are always, fraught with fear and discomfort, which I doubt either of us are strangers to
Yeah.
those feelings.
Do you think that there's something leaders should be doing in order to incorporate AI the best way, like the ideal way that they infuse it into their organization when it comes to their ops or processes, workflows, et cetera?
I mean, you do have to start with risk and thinking about what is the risk of just use the large language models. If you wanted to have a chat GPT rewrite a memo, draft an email, the superhuman email client, if folks aren't using, is pretty amazing, where you type in the 4 bullet points you want to communicate, it drafts the letter or it drafts the follow-up. I have no affiliation with superhuman, but I'm pretty impressed with it. I don't think you can ignore it. I think I will say, if there's an inefficient process in your company, ask AI how to fix it. If you're paying for an AI tool, so $20 a month for ChatGPT, $30 for Grok, I think Claude is 25, it doesn't matter. But all of their contracts are pretty clear that if you're paying for it, you're not training the model. And that was the major fear when this all came out in November of 22, is folks were uploading it and you could ask Microsoft what its earnings would be. And because their analysts were using it, you were getting that data. So now all those contracts are pretty clear in that if you're paying for it, uh, it is not training its model based
Yeah.
on what you're uploading. But if you have protected health info, PII, like you should maybe anonymize it before you do that. So I would say ask it how to be better, whether it's a business process, a communication issue. There's a world where if you can dream it at this point, like it can happen,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I do a lot of calls like this are often on Zoom. I can drag the audio into a folder where some Python script, I don't know how to write Python, but sure enough, it will take the audio, it'll transcribe it, it'll email me a summary of the call, it'll draft a follow-up letter for me. And so literally, as soon as I'm done with a sales call, it'll give me feedback on how I am as a sales rep, which is just average. But I'm working on it. Like, so it will tell, like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, Greg, you kind of closed without asking what next steps were. So um, the realm of personal improvement. I mean, you've got the world's greatest
Yeah.
teacher in every topic, literally at your
Yeah.
fingertips. So I would encourage that. If I was a leader, I would say everybody should be, learning the things that are important to them, finding ways to do their job faster, easier, more automatically.
I think that's great advice. I will look forward to getting the email after this, the email follow up. Just to wrap up, if you had a single piece of advice, I love to ask this question at the end. I'm just really kind of curious if you had a single piece of advice for business leaders when it comes to their people. You're on an elevator up to the top floor. You only have a minute before they walk right out the door. What's the one thing that you tell them? What do you leave them with to how to get it right from day one?
I, I leaning in and engaging with individuals just always seems to be the right call.
Yeah.
The Whether it's 15 minutes in the morning with your developer in India, the weekend before the festival, like I got to meet some of my people last week. Literally, it was just the 10 minutes of what are you working on, how you feeling about it, how's life in general. That goes so far to now when I leave feedback on a design or send a follow-up email, I have this picture in my head of a person and a family and a town and an event. I know as companies get to 500 and 5,000 and 50,000, a CEO can't do that with everybody, but can
Yeah.
certainly empower their managers, their supervisors to say, look, you should really know your folks as best as you possibly can within reason. They're grabbing the beer, grabbing the coffee in the morning, like that human connection that
Yeah.
matters, and AI can't replace that. So
Yeah.
value human connection.
I love it. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today, Greg. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great.
And of course, thanks to everybody for joining us. This is Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Also recommend visiting mustardhub.com. There you can learn more about Mustard Hub and get started for free. Discover how we help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. Till next time.